close your eyes. Picture the 1950s. What do you see? Elvis Presley shaking his hips, Marilyn Monroe in a white dress, diners serving milkshakes. Now, what car do you see parked outside that diner? I bet it has big tail fins. I bet it's covered in chrome. And I bet it's a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air. It is the most recognized car in history. It is the Mona Lisa of the American highway. It represents a time when gas was cheap, roads were wide, and the future looked bright. But here's the secret. Before the Bel Air, Chevrolet was born. In the 1940s, Chevy didn't build cool cars. They built cars for your grandfather. They were slow. They were heavy. They were nicknamed stove bolts because their engines were as ancient as a wood-burning stove. So how did a company known for boring, practical transportation suddenly build the coolest car on earth? How did they turn steel into rock and roll? This is the story of the Bel Air. We're going to take a ride through the golden age of Detroit. If you love the smell of gasoline and nostalgia, hit that subscribe button. Let's fire up the engine. The year is 1949. America has won the war. The soldiers are home. The baby boom is happening. People have money in their pockets and they want to spend it. But General Motors had a problem. Their cars looked old. At that time, if you wanted a luxury car with the wind in your hair, you bought a convertible. But convertibles were noisy, leaky, and dangerous if you rolled over. If you wanted safety, you bought a sedan with a solid roof. But sedans looked like shoeboxes. There was no middle ground. Enter Harley Earl, the Da Vinci of Detroit, the head of GM Design. Harley Earl had a vision. He noticed that the wife of one of his designers drove a convertible but never put the top down because she didn't want to mess up her hair. She loved the look of the open windows with no pillar in the middle, but she wanted a steel roof. Well, Harley Earl sketched an idea, a hardtop convertible. A car with a solid steel roof, but with no B-pillar between the front and rear windows. When you rolled all the windows down, the side of the car was completely open. It looked sleek. It looked expensive. In 1950, Chevrolet introduced this new body style. They needed a name that sounded fancy, something that sounded like the high life in California. They called it the Bel Air. Named after the wealthy neighborhood in Los Angeles, the 1950 Bel Air was not a separate model yet. It was just a trim level of the deluxe style line. But it was a sensation. It cost $1,741. It featured a two-tone paint job and a roof that looked like a convertible top. The public went wild. It was stylish yet affordable. But there was still one major problem. Under the hood, in the 1950 Bel Air was still powering the past. It had the ancient Blue Flame inline-6 engine. It produced only 92 horsepower. It struggled to reach highway speeds. It looked like a cheetah, but it ran like a turtle. Ford, Chevrolet's biggest rival, had a V8 engine, the flathead V8. It was the engine of choice for hot rodders and bank robbers. If you wanted to go fast, you bought a Ford. If you wanted to get to church safely, you bought a Chevy. GM executives knew this had to change. They needed a new heart for their new beauty. By 1954, Chevrolet sales were slipping. Ford was dominating the youth market. The Bel Air had become a standalone model in 1953, becoming the flagship of the brand, but it was still slow. General Motors made a desperate move. They hired a new chief engineer, a man named Ed Cole. Ed Cole was a maverick. He didn't want to just update the old engine. He wanted to throw it in the trash. He promised to build a brand new V8 engine that was lighter, more powerful, and cheaper to build than anything Ford had. And he had less than 15 weeks to design it. Cole and his team worked day and night. They slept in the factory. They lived on coffee and cigarettes. What they created became the most famous piece of engineering in automotive history. The small block Chevy 5.8, 265 cubic inches, 162 horsepower. It was a masterpiece of simplicity, but a new engine needed a new body. For 1955, Chevrolet completely redesigned the car. They threw away the old rounded fat fenders of the 1940s. They introduced the Motoramic look, straight lines, hooded headlights inspired by Ferrari, a wide egg crate grille. When the 1955 Bel Air debuted, the press called it the hot one. It was a shock to the system. Suddenly, the grandma car could do 0 to 60 in 12 seconds. That sounds slow today, but in 1955, it was a rocket ship. The 1955 Bel Air didn't just drive, it floated. It had bright two-tone paint, gypsy red and shoreline beige, regal turquoise, and India ivory. It matched the optimism of the atomic age. Advertising posters screamed, "Go ahead, catch the V8 fever." And America caught the fever. Dealers couldn't keep them in stock. Hot rodders realized that the new Chevy V8 was lighter and easier to tune than the old Ford Flathead. Almost overnight, the street racing scene switched allegiance from Ford to Chevy. The 1955 model was the first year of the legendary Tri-5 era, 1955, 1956, 1957. It was the beginning of a dynasty. How do you improve on perfection? For 1956, Chevrolet decided to make the Bel Air look wider and more substantial. They stretched the grille across the entire front. They added more chrome. They moved the fuel filler cap, hiding it behind the left tail light, a feature that James Bond would have appreciated. The 1956 Bel Air was the car for the suburbs. It was the car for the new American middle class. But something else was happening in 1956. The horsepower war was heating up. Ford introduced a bigger engine. Chrysler introduced the Hemi. Chevrolet responded by offering the Super Turbofire V8. With a 4-barrel carburetor, it put out 205 horsepower. The Bel Air was becoming a muscle car before the term muscle car even existed. But nobody knew that the best was yet to come. The designers at GM were working on a facelift for 1957. They wanted to create a totally new car for 1957, but production delays meant they had to stick with the 1955 chassis for one more year. They thought the 1957 model would just be a placeholder. A stopgap until the 1958 models arrived. They were accidentally creating a legend. The peak of the tail fin era. The 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air is not just a car. It is a sculpture. Harley Earl and his team took the 1956 body and added magic. They added sharp pointed fins to the rear, not huge cartoonish fins like Cadillac, but sharp aggressive fins that looked like a jet fighter. They added a massive aluminum panel to the rear quarter, making the car shine like a jewel. They added twin rockets to the hood. The front bumper had rubber Dagmar bullets, named after a busty TV actress of the time. It was aggressive. It was flashy. It was pure rock and roll. But the real magic was under the hood. For 1957, Ed Cole increased the engine size to 283 cubic inches. And for the first time, he offered a secret weapon: ramjet fuel injection. The Fuelie 1957 Bel Air produced 283 horsepower from 283 cubic inches, 1 horsepower per cubic inch. This was the holy grail of engine building. Until then, only expensive European race cars could achieve that efficiency. Now you could buy it in a Chevrolet. The 1957 Bel Air was a sleeper. You could pull up to a stoplight next to a rich guy in a Jaguar or a Thunderbird. When the light turned green, the humble Chevy would leave them in a cloud of tire smoke. It became the favorite car of the drag strip. It became the favorite car of the drive-in movie theater. Ironically, in 1957, Ford actually outsold Chevrolet for the first time in years. The public at the time thought the 57 Chevy looked a bit old-fashioned compared to the lower, wider Fords. But history is funny. Today, nobody remembers the 1957 Ford, but everybody knows the 57 Chevy. It aged like fine wine while the others rusted away. All good parties must come to an end. By 1958, the mood in America was changing. The space race had begun. Cars were getting bigger, heavier, and more complex. For 1958, Chevrolet introduced a completely new design. The sharp, crisp lines of the Tri-5 were gone. The 1958 Bel Air, now called the Impala for the top trim, was long, low, and heavy. It had quad headlights and looked like a spaceship. It was a successful car, but it lost the magic. It lost the sporty simplicity of the 1955 to 1957 models. The Bel Air nameplate continued for many years, all the way into the 1970s, but it was slowly demoted. The Impala became the luxury model. The Caprice became the top dog. The Bel Air was stripped of its chrome, stripped of its glory, and eventually became a budget car for taxi fleets and police departments. The name that once defined luxury and style ended its life as a cheap plastic sedan. But the legend of the Tri-5 never died. In the 1970s, movies like American Graffiti brought the 55 and 57 Chevy back into the spotlight. They became the symbol of a lost innocence, a symbol of a time when anything seemed possible. Today, a pristine 1957 Bel Air convertible can cost over $100,000. But you don't buy a Bel Air for the investment. You buy it for the feeling. When you sit behind that massive steering wheel, looking out over the twin rocket hood ornaments, you aren't just driving a car. You are driving a time machine. You can hear the faint echo of Elvis on the radio. You can smell the burgers from the drive-in. You can feel the optimism of a generation that believed they would live on the moon. The Chevrolet Bel Air proves that a machine can have a soul. It was born from a desire to be better. It lived fast, and it will never be forgotten. Thanks for riding with us. Drive safe and keep the spirit alive. If this video took you back in time, hit the like button. Do you prefer the 55, the 56, or the 57? Let the battle begin in the comments below.